are talking about the movie The Guard of Auschwitz, also known as Absolution SS. This one is directed and co-written by Terry Lee Coker. Now, this one tells a story of a Nazi officer, and it's his point of view. So you're seeing him as a guard in Auschwitz, as the title suggests, and it's his story from his perspective. So obviously this is a movie about the darkest time in modern human history, and it's almost a companion piece to Schindler's List, just on a fraction of the budget. So what we have this guy called Hans, and he isn't actually an architect by trade, and he is put into this kind of prison camp at the kind of request of his father, who is a higher ranking SS official, to try and keep him on the front line to, you know, basically protect him. And because of his talents as an architect, he's basically instructed by the commandant to essentially design and kind of oversee the construction of the gas chambers under the guise of it being, you know, shower units and stuff like that. While he's there, however, he's very conflicted. He has these kind of really sort of two mindsets. He's very loyal to the kind of the Nazi party and kind of wants to serve Hitler, etc. But he doesn't necessarily agree with what they're doing at the prison camps, etc. And has really kind of conflicting ideas. And he actually ends up befriending this kind of this pregnant Jewish girl who he kind of has this kind of relationship with, and that's ultimately the driving force of this story, is that his relationship with this Jewish girl, but also with his father and this kind of this commandant. So let's talk about what works first of all with The Guard of Auschwitz. Like I said, it's a very low budget film, so don't be expecting anything on the scale of you know, Schindler's List or things like that. Plus, obviously, you know, there are budgetary constraints to be had in regards to what they can do. So, what works? First of all, I've got to say, I thought the portrayal of this commandant by an actor called Michael McKell was absolutely terrifyingly powerful. He really did give a very scary performance as this kind of SS officer, this high-ranking SS officer, who seems to have absolutely no conscience. He has no humanity left in him whatsoever, and you know, you really get the impression he just sees the Jews as nothing more than really just insects, just kind of like pests to be kind of swept away. And you just see he absolutely just doesn't see them as kind of as humans. So I thought his performance, despite this being a low-budget movie, was very, very powerful. So I thought he was, you know, very effective in the role as being a person. Even with his fellow kind of Germans, he seems to be quite kind of, you know, unpredictable with. So that was very good. But I've got to say, I think the acting for the most part here was all relatively good, despite obviously, again, budget restrictions and probably not loads of takes and things like that. I think the acting for the most part here was pretty good. And I've got to say, some of the scenes in regards to cinematography were also quite well done. We have a kind of a prologue at the beginning of the movie, which is kind of in black and white, which I think is quite effective. And there's some good scenes in like a train station where they're all coming off the kind of the trains on the kind of, you know, to go off to the camps, etc. Now, when we kind of get into the camps, again, due to budget restrictions, you'll see a lot of the camera work is much more kind of close up, obviously to hide the fact they don't have, like, you know, huge kind of like sets and stuff like that. So you'll notice from that point on, it really just kind of goes into a kind of close-ups and stuff like that. The biggest complaint I have with this film is that it's spoken English. So rather than kind of it all being set with German, you know, characters, so to speak, but everyone speaks English but with a German accent. So it definitely lacks that air of authenticity. Now, you could argue you watch TV shows like Vikings, and they obviously speak English but with kind of a, you know, a Nordic accent, obviously, so we can understand them. And I understand the decision for doing that, but obviously it does take away from the real kind of authenticity that maybe this film would have got had we had German actors and it be ultimately a subtitled film. So there is that. And like I said, the budgetary restraints do show through. The majority of this film is very kind of filmed on a close-up to kind of try and hide the kind of the lack of kind of sets and things like that and location shooting. There are a couple of instances where we see, I mean, this is not an action film in any stretch, it's a drama, but there are a couple of sequences where we have, you know, guns being fired. They're kind of look, the muzzle shots just look a little bit like, obviously kind of like put on from After Effects, and the sound effects just seem a little bit kind of like tinny and weak. But that's relatively kind of minor. But the crux of the story here is a drama. It is the relationship between two people. I didn't really understand necessarily why this whilst Hans particularly kind of picks this girl out, I have to say, from a script point of view. He kind of just randomly decides he wants to be friends with her, and I didn't really see any particular reason why that was. It wasn't like he was romantically attached to her, as it appears. So I didn't really get that why specifically her rather than anyone else, if that makes sense. Now, in case you're wondering, this movie is not actually based on real people. I was reading that it is ultimately a work of fiction, but based on obviously the real kind of Auschwitz and what's happened. And the director was interviewing kind of like you know, survivors and stuff like that to kind of get first hand about what happened. But the actual story itself is actually a work of kind of fiction, in case you were wondering. So yeah, I mean, I actually think for what it's trying to do in regards to this kind of dramatic overtones, I think the acting is pretty good. Like I said, it's not particularly visually that interesting because we are just in kind of huts for the most part. So although I feel the acting is to a good standard, and obviously the story is ultimately very tragic, it's not one of the more visually stimulating films ultimately, but I feel if you are invested in the characters, and I gotta say, I think everyone did a fairly good job here, then obviously sometimes you can kind of overcome those kind of things. Now, I feel people may be put off by the kind of the budgetary restraints here, and they do show through. There's no getting away from it. This is obviously a very low budget production. However, I feel you have to try and look at this movie from you know, from what they can do with the budget that was provided ultimately. So this certainly isn't going to be for everyone. This certainly isn't a movie that's going to appeal, probably even to you know, fans of action World War II dramas and stuff like this. It's a very kind of dour, a very kind of obviously a grim subject matter. But I feel like there are some good performances here. You know, it doesn't quite get to the standards of acting that we're talking about, you know, with the kind of like the big movies. But I thought they do a fairly good job here. So I'll give this movie a 6 out of 10. I actually think they do, you know, a fairly good, passable job here of making a engaging kind of World War II drama that is tinged with both tragedy and, you know, a little glimmer of hope maybe. 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.